Brad Underwood doubles down on three-point shooting. Locked On Illini. Let's go.
You are Locked On Illini, your daily podcast on the Illinois Fighting Illini. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome one, welcome all to another edition of Locked On Illini. Thank you all so much for making us your first listen each and every day. My name is Sonny Verma, your host here at Locked On Illini, where I continue to provide you coverage daily. That's right, every single day. No such thing as an off season here at Locked On. The only thing I ask for in return is if you can smash that like button and make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Look, it's my goal to hit 5,000 subs before the kickoff of football season. Can you help me get there? I sincerely hope you can. Today is going to be a fun episode because I just got done listening to Brad Underwood on the Field of 68 podcast. I know it's a YouTube show. I think it's a podcast as well. And Brad had some interesting words to say, which I think a lot of Illini fans will have a lot of thoughts on because they had a lot of thoughts on it as the season went on. So obviously, Brad was on the show. The Duke game was brought up, and one of the guys had mentioned that, hey, that was a game that nobody enjoyed. The only people who enjoyed watching that was Duke fans. Even national writers did not like that absolute drubbing and embarrassment that we had to witness in Madison Square Garden. And Brad Underwood talked about that a little bit, and he talked about the positives in the sense where they made 12 of 14 two-pointers. And he talked about that in the locker room, saying, hey, guys, this Duke team is the best two-point defending team in the country, and you made 12 out of 14. And one of those misses, he mentioned, was a bunny layup that you just happened to miss. So he was actually very positive on that regard. But there's a reason that game was a drubbing. And in that first half, the team was 0 of 16 from three-point land. And Brad brought that up. He talked about going into that locker room and saying, hey, guys, we've made 0 out of 16 three-pointers, but I've seen you in practice. They have what's called a NOAA system, which is like next generation. It studies the form, the art of shooting, and it kind of can correct you and put you in the best places on the basketball court where you're going to be most efficient and, quite frankly, make the most baskets. And he said, hey, look, if you missed 16 shots in that first half, all 16, that means you're about to make a lot of those three-pointers in the second half. Now, he did joke that the only person who doesn't pay attention to social media is Brad, and that he understood that during some of those rough games this past season that everyone was saying Illinois can't shoot, and that they need to change things around. And he didn't, right? And Brad said so, like, hey, I watched this team shoot 40% from practice each and every day. And that confidence never wavered in that basketball team. Now, ultimately, those flawed, and we all know the definition of insanity, but Brad never really adjusted throughout that season. And if anything, we heard him say it in that interview, and we've seen it in his roster construction for this upcoming season. He's doubling down. He isn't planning on changing his offensive philosophy in any sort of way. He brought in Zvonimir Ivisic, who is a three-point shooter. Arguably, he might be the best three-point shooter on the team next year. He brought back Ben Humrichous. And I say brought back. Notice, at the end of the year, he kept on insisting himself that he really wanted Ben to come back, even though there's a fragment of the fan base which was ready to let Ben go. Brad wasn't one of those. Brad wanted Ben back. Maybe not in the same role that he played last season, but still, the gravity that comes with Ben Humrichous on the basketball court, Brad wanted that. Why? Because he's planning on doing the same thing and running it back next season. Now, quite honestly, I'm a little conflicted with this interview, which I watched, which, by the way, the link was actually dropped in the Discord, the Talk Illini Discord, which I try to mention at least once every episode. It's over 300 Illini fans throughout the country talking Illini sports each and every day. And today, this was one of the main topics that we were discussing. Obviously, if you're a fan of Locked On Illini and you've been watching this show, shout out to my everydayers. You know that I do understand, and I'm one of the few who actually does support this 3-point shooting that Tyler Underwood and Brad Underwood have kind of put together, the system. I think it makes sense because it's working in the NBA. And usually that's what the process is. Whatever works in the NBA slowly, it's going to trickle down to the levels below because that's what the coaches are watching. That's what the players are watching. And the NBA, understandably, has lost a decent amount of its fan base because a lot of people think it's all about three-point shooting, all about three-point shooting. And for the most part, it is. But it is because of math. And that's what the analytics are telling you. Brad Underwood isn't the only one, and Illinois isn't the only one shooting a lot of three-pointers. Alabama shoots a lot of three-pointers. A lot of the best teams in the country shoot a lot of three-pointers. I think the criticism comes that last year's Illinois team just didn't end up being a very good three-point shooting team. Kasparas Jakučionis had a great first half of the season shooting that step-back three-pointer, but once he got hurt, that three-pointer wasn't falling nearly as much. I've already kind of mentioned Ben Humrichous. Ben Humrichous came in here, and we all expected him to come into Champaign and shoot 40-plus from three-point land. And it just seemed like he had those games when the spotlight was on him, those shots just weren't falling. Will Riley was just a flat-out awful shooter for the majority of the season. Then he obviously stepped his game up the last 2 months of the year. So a team that was built around three-point shooting could not hit three-point shooting. And you can see where the problem lies. Now, the issue is, should Brad have adjusted at some point? Should he have pivoted away? That argument, I think, is absolutely sound. Maybe have some sort of backup plan. But I just think with the way that roster was constructed, that the backup plan really wasn't there. And I'll tell you, me being a Brad Underwood supporter, the excuse is not going to be there next season. Obviously, he's going all in again on the three-point shooting aspect of this basketball team. If it doesn't work next year and at some point he doesn't make the adjustment, people are going to be angry, and justifiably. Now, just because he hasn't made that adjustment last season doesn't mean that Brad Underwood doesn't make adjustments. He talked about it in this Field of 68 interview where he talked about when he coached at the lower leagues that he had no choice but to basically adjust on the fly. That you never really recruited guys. You just saw who would show up in that locker room on the first day and basically concoct an offense from that point on. There's no such thing as a strategy. Now that he's coaching at this level, there is more of a grand plan. Next year will be interesting to observe because, again, if he does go with the same plan, look, I help my daughter with her first grade homework each and every day, and I can confirm to you that 3 points is more than 2 points. And so the strategy on a grand scale seems to make sense to me. But I also think that on next year's team that we're going to have a couple more options to pivot. I've watched Petrovic's game, and I do think he's a guy who can get to the hole, put his head down and get to the hole. We missed that on last year's team. Kasparas wasn't really that guy. Will Riley did develop into that guy at the end of the season, and that at the end of the season is when Illinois, in my opinion, started playing some of their best ball. Ben, I don't think is going to be counted on to play 25, 30 minutes on next year's team. I think he can come in with maybe a little less pressure, play 10, 15 minutes a game. And you know what? When the pressure's off, maybe those shots start falling in. And when he does have the hot hand, you can keep him in for 20 plus minutes. And overall, I just think with the roster construction, right? Last year's team was built on the two freshmen being your best players. This year, we're not going to have that problem. We're going to have Tomislav Ivisic playing his second year in college basketball. We're going to have a senior year, Kylan Boswell. We're going to have a junior, Andrei Stojakovic, a kid who's competed at a very high level at the ACC. Bringing in these new players and the new pieces of next year's team, I can, at least at the moment, back Brad's insistence on trying to run it back when it comes to the same style of offense. But we all know the definition of insanity. It's to do the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. I don't know how much patience I'm going to have if we start off the season, first month, 2 months, and we're having the same sort of struggles and we don't see the adjustments that need to be made offensively. Brad gets a lot of flack, and understandably, I think, for his hire of Tyler Underwood. Again, looking at the offensive efficiency numbers for this Illinois team, in Tyler's first 2 years, right now I still support the hire. I still think Tyler is a pretty decent assistant coach and one that can develop into being a better one. But a part of being a coach and a part of learning of the whole process is to be able to make adjustments. Can Tyler Underwood do that? And ultimately, if the shots aren't falling, can Brad Underwood do that? If he can't, Brad's going to have a very difficult choice to make about possibly replacing his son on the assistant coaching staff. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. Look, I'm not even talking about the NBA. Right now, Illinois is plus 3,800 to win the Big Ten Conference in football next season. Now, I don't think it's likely, and I don't even think they should be in any sort of way favored, but I think they're like the 7th highest odds. Look, I'm not giving financial advice, but plus 3,800 for an Illinois football team that is not playing any of the juggernauts except for Ohio State, might be worth a sprinkle of a nickel or two. If you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Terrence Shannon Jr. is starting to get some love. Smash that like button if you think it's about time. Now, Terrence, obviously, we've known has had an up and down rookie season, mostly down, but I don't think any of it is his fault. Obviously, he got picked in the first round, picked number 27, and we were all very excited for the most part because he was drafted by the Minnesota Timberwolves. Timberwolves were perceived to be a very up-and-coming team. They eventually lost to the Dallas Mavericks last season, but it looked like it was going to be one of those teams that, with superstar Anthony Edwards, was well on its way to potential future NBA Finals appearances, and Terrence Shannon could kind of play maybe right behind Anthony Edwards and kind of learn and play a pivotal role on the team this season. I mean, Terrence is 24 years old. He had the NBA body. He's had the NBA body in the last 2 years of college basketball, so it looked like it was going to be a very good fit. We can't exactly say that that's been the case. The Minnesota head coach, for whatever reason, really only plays 8 guys in his roster and hasn't really given Terrence an opportunity to showcase his skills. Terrence, for the season, played in 32 games, averaged about 10.5 minutes, and in those minutes, he scored about 4 points per game, shooting 48% and 35% from three-point land. Again, just a lot of frustrations from Illini fans about his lack of playing time. But if you've been watching these NBA playoffs, and if you haven't, you're absolutely missing out. We've got 4 very young teams that just haven't been at this level before. There's no Golden State Warriors. There's no Boston Celtics. There's a lot of fresh blood in the conference finals right now. And Terrence Shannon Jr., over the last couple of games, has shown up. 2 games ago against Oklahoma City in a victory, a 143-101 victory, Terrence had 13 minutes. He scored 15 points in those 13 minutes. And in the last game, which was 128-126 loss against Oklahoma City, he scored 9 points in just 8 minutes. And he's been the talk of social media. A lot of folks are wondering who this young kid is. In fact, you know who knows who this young kid is? It's Alex Rodriguez, the owner of the Minnesota Timberwolves. Had a conversation with Stephen A. Smith before the last game. And Stephen A. Smith absolutely just talked about this on First Take very recently. He said that Alex pointed at Terrence and said, Stephen, that young cat, he is a future asset to this Minnesota Timberwolves team. Now, again, a lot of Illini fans are frustrated because, I mean, if he's showing up the way he is, why isn't he playing more minutes? Well, just take a look at this last game. This is where I try to take my Illini bias hat off and just watch it as an NBA fan. The problem with the Minnesota Timberwolves is that they've got a lot of good players playing the same position as Terrence Shannon Jr. And sure, Terrence had 9 points in 8 minutes, but you know what? Dante DiVincenzo had 21 points in 28 minutes. He had a very good game himself. Nickeil Alexander-Walker, also a shooting guard on Minnesota, was 9 for 15 and had 23 points against the Thunder in their previous meeting. All these guys are playing the same role as Terrence, and so that's why it's hard for Terrence to get the minutes that he wants. And again, it's nice to see Terrence getting love from the national guys, because us Illini fans have been talking about him all season long, trying to vent our frustrations. We know he's a really good basketball player, and we knew that he was going to be on a very good basketball team this year. We just thought that he would have a bigger role on this. And quite honestly, I couldn't help but wonder about what's going to happen with Will Riley and Kasper Siakam. As I mentioned, last draft day, I was pretty excited when Terrence Shannon Jr. got drafted by the Minnesota Timberwolves. Sure, I felt like he was a borderline lottery talent, at least maybe in the late teens. To me, he seemed like a 3-and-D guy who could play at this level right away. The NBA disagreed. He went to Minnesota. I thought, you know what? That's great. Terrence Shannon Jr. is going to play a pivotal role on a potential NBA Finals. Seeing how the season has played out is going to make me be a little bit more patient about my initial impressions on where Kasper Siakam and Will Riley are going to be drafted in just a couple of weeks. Sure, there's some situations out there. There's certain teams out there that I think that Will and Kasper are going to be very good fits for, but we're not going to know until it plays out. I think Kasper needs to go to a team that's going to let him develop, let him have the ball. I think his game dictates it. He needs to have the ball to make his teammates better. I would love for him to be drafted by a team like maybe the Toronto Raptors, or there's been recent word that the Chicago Bulls, my personal favorite team, are looking at Igor Domin. So in a sense, they're looking for a bigger guard, and maybe Kasper is going to be on their board at some point. For Will Riley, I think he needs to go to a team that's just going to just let him shoot. Let him do what he does best. Let him be a playmaker and let him attack the rim. That guy was put on this earth to make baskets. And I really do think that if he's given the opportunity at the NBA level, he can absolutely get the job done. I do fear that if Will gets drafted onto a team similar to where Terrence Shannon was drafted and the team just doesn't need him, I really do think that Will Riley could potentially just waste away at the G League and we may never hear from him again. But again, that just shows you what I know, right? I thought Terrence Shannon Jr. was going to be in a perfect situation with a very good basketball. And I was just half right. He's on a very good basketball team that's potentially about to make it to the NBA Finals, but he hasn't had much of a role during the season. But I'm glad that he's getting his moment now when the light is the brightest, when the NBA playoffs is something that everybody's talking about. And it's just nice to know that the Minnesota Timberwolves ownership, despite them being new, Alex Rodriguez just got control of the franchise very, very recently. He understands what he has. And maybe that means that there is a future for Terrence in Minnesota. One thing we know about Terrence Shannon Jr. is that he will not be outworked. Okay, we all saw the videos of him working out at 5 a.m. He had his own keys to the gym. He's not going to be outworked by anybody. All he needs is the opportunity. Sure, I can be frustrated by Minnesota's coaching staff for him not getting that opportunity. But if I try to be unbiased about it, I can see the guys ahead of him are pretty good themselves. But that doesn't mean that those same guys are going to be there next year. And if ownership sees that they have a very talented asset in Terrence, and he's showcasing himself right now against one of the best teams in the entire league and performing, maybe that means he's going to get a bigger role moving forward. I know Illini Nation is definitely going to be hoping for it. And welcome back to Locked On Illini. Again, if you haven't already, make sure you hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed to the channel, especially if you're here for the very first time. Hey, my name is Sonny and I do this each and every day, even during the off season. For this particular segment, I wanted to focus on the students. So if you're a parent, if you're an alum, if you have students going to the University of Illinois, or if you're a student yourself who's just trying to get acclimated to the world of Illini athletics and you're about to step foot on campus for the first time in fall, this segment is for you. Illinois football just announced on Tuesday that they're going to announce a 4-year student season ticket plan for $250. So if you're a freshman entering campus for the first time in fall, you can guarantee yourself a seat for every football game your entire college career for simply $250. Look, in the past, this wouldn't be such a big deal because you could get these tickets for very cheap when it comes to Illini football, but that's no longer the case. Season tickets for the general public have sold out. I've gotten word that they're pretty close to selling out the 4 game plans that they're kind of focusing on selling right now. There's going to be a lot of people at Memorial Stadium this season and hopefully in the seasons moving forward. And I've said this before, if you're a student, there's no better way to really soak in the atmosphere, to really get involved with your university's athletic team than being there with your friends. And again, in the past, look, people my age and years prior, we didn't have a very good football team to root for. This Illinois football team is coming off of 10 wins and a victory over an SEC team in a bowl game, and right now are projected to possibly repeat what they did last year. Brett Bielema has this train rolling. All of us have figured it out. We've sold out our season ticket allotments. It's the young student fan base that right now, hopefully, the University of Illinois is going to be able to attract and lock in, and we can have that student section as rowdy as possible. Look, Memorial Stadium's never really considered much of a home field advantage when it comes to the Illini compared to some of their competition in the Big Ten, but let's change that. And I think the university is doing a brilliant job by offering the season ticket plan. Again, 4 years worth of season tickets for only $250. Please, if you're able to, please try to take advantage of this. Another thing I wanted to mention is if you're a student, you probably know what college football, the video game, is all about. And the video game is going to be coming out sometime in July. And they just released the new cover of it. And while there's a lot of representation, there's a lot of Big Ten representation. I think on the actual cover, you have Jeremiah Smith and Ryan Williams, the 2 wide receivers from Ohio State and Alabama on it. But on the deluxe edition, there's a lot of players and there's a lot of fan bases. You see Big Ten, Penn State, you see Oregon. And what kind of irked me, I'm not going to lie, is you see an Indiana flag and 0 representation for Illinois. Now, look, last year we didn't get any representation either, but in the trailer that they did release, you did see Illinois beat Ohio State and raising the Illibuk trophy. So who knows, maybe we'll get some love in the trailer that's supposed to be released also sometime this week. But again, it's just frustrating for me to seeing Indiana get all this love and being on the cover of this video game. I know, look, you old heads are going to be like, who cares? This doesn't matter. It matters, guys. The perception matters. The youth of America is playing this game. It's consistently one of the top selling games in the entire country. And I do think that, should Illinois be able to have a successful team this year and maybe repeat the performances that they made last year, that, hey, maybe we can get that block eye on the cover of next year's football team. Let me know in the chat if you played last year's game, if you're planning on playing this year's game. There's been talk about possibly starting a league in our Discord. So if that's something you're interested in, again, the link should be in the description. Make sure you don't miss out. Another friendly reminder, we're only a couple weeks away now, June 20th. I will be meeting a lot of the community at Wrigleyville. It'll be Cubs against the Seattle Mariners. So we'll have a little pregame meetup before the game, during the game, and after the game. So if that's something you're interested in, just send me an email at talkillini@gmail.com. and I can send you over details. Also, a week later, we're going to be meeting up for the NBA lottery. And hopefully we'll be able to watch Kasper Jakishonis and maybe even Will Riley start their NBA careers. Thank you for making Locked On Illini your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Portal Show. Brian Smith has the latest rumors, portal entries, and signings. Be the most informed fan on the rapid changes to the college football landscape. Find the Portal on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you all so much for joining me. I promise you we have an action-packed week ahead. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss a thing. Until next time, ILL. Love you guys.